All right, so I actually want to thank the organizers. Thanks SIAM, NSF, No Innovation for actually running this together. So we're talking at things, a conversation at the local level, and thanks for my team. Our group of 4 have been intrepidly going through this. And here's the, so forward is, I did, very good. Okay, so here's the problem. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of information out there. And the real question is, how can you actually communicate this to individuals to actually make individual decisions that are actually helpful to the climate, to actually make things work? How do you actually get that information? How do you actually trust that information and actually counter that misinformation that may be available that can be found in the media? How do you actually how do decision makers get the information to actually make informed decisions? How do you actually connect this data to the actual decision maker's context in order for them to actually use it? And also, how do you actually gain trust within the decision makers to actually accept a certain source of information for what's there? So the idea is we want to build a means of support for community leaders and decision makers so that they can make informed choices, and those informed choices can actually lead to better outcomes for the environment and climate change. Okay, so here's the big idea. This is a solicitation, right? This is not a proposal. I have no idea what people are going to propose to do. We're just setting up a framework for which the experts can come up with the ideas and solve them. So the idea is we have a whole range of data that's over there on the left. There's a big red circle with a question mark. That's where the experts fill in their ideas and figure out what to do. On the right is the behavior, looking at information based on demographics from zip code, county, and state. We're looking at local responses based on this. And the idea is you have this feedback loop. So you basically have ideas, what's going on in the middle. How do you filter that data? That data goes to the individuals. They have a response. How do you then correct for that response? What incentives do you actually need in order for the people to actually make those informed decisions? Do you do tax breaks? Do you do some sort of rebates? Do you do something of that nature? So the idea is you want to build mathematical models to figure out what the filtering is going to be. You want to figure out maybe agent-based models to actually figure out the behavior, make informed decisions of what that can actually be predicted. And you want to see overall, how does that affect type of climate change instabilities or mitigation based on that. Okay, so what kind of proposal ideas could you imagine? Oh, by the way, this solicitation is between DMS and social behavior and economics. It'll probably have to be a joint listing. All parties have to play in the game, right? All right, so proposal ideas. So this is a list based on that. I'll focus on the mathematical aspects based on what's here. So looking at combinatorial models for selection of the data streams. So much like looking at auctions for ads in terms of websites and what's there. You could actually look, how do you distill the data? That's an optimization problem in terms of figuring out what's involved with that. Social response based on that. How do you quantify the uncertainty involved with that in terms of how you actually get these collection of individual responses and what comes about from that. In the long term, if you look at the column on the right, suppose you're a farmer and you want to figure out, do you plant soybeans or corn? What if you had a data stream that told you futures prices and had some predictions on that, along with potentials for extreme events and for different choices of that? How would you actually make that choice? What if you had a collective model in terms of accounting, in terms of decision makers? It could be based on flood mitigation. It could be based on a range of different things. And also, what if so how many people have smart thermostats? They're really not that smart. They won't take the outside temperature in terms of informing why you set your indoor environment based on that. What if you actually had a data stream for these thermostats to actually go through and use that information, use commodity prices for fuel to decide how you actually go and heat your home? This type of technology can then be leveraged once you've actually figured out the sort of optimization scheme in terms of data filters and data streams. All right, so here are the mathematical challenges. How do you synthesize this data? How do you model the data at different scales? How do you actually figure out and validate the information based on that? What are the tipping points in terms of policy adaptation and involved with that, and what's actually for the incentives, the policy for that? What are the behavioral science motivations here? How do you actually quantify behavior? How does the rationality play a role in this? How do you actually use various sources of data to build the behavioral rules? How do you actually interpret the behavioral models and then make actionable solutions based on this? How do you actually integrate these multidisciplinary efforts based on what these models are at different levels? And then this data, right? How do you actually use the data? Do you have good data? How do you actually decide on the data? How do you interface the data with scientific data with social science data? So again, why do you need maybe in rural Oklahoma, you do need to know what type of sea temperature anomalies are there. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So how do you deal with the implicit bias in terms of missing data issues that you typically found in data collection? Okay, this will work. There we go. Values and impacts. We can identify relevant metrics for actionable decisions. We can identify incentive schemes to better promote climate mitigation. And then we can actually build a framework for future development for these smart devices, actually go through. So these are just some of the expected values and impacts that are there. In terms of broader impacts, you can actually look in terms of education. So you can actually have programs looking at, where these initial sources, what kind of careers can you get in math and science to get these data sources? How do you actually recognize methods of social manipulation? So in other words, behavioral sciences, what can you actually do with that? How can government labs and agencies, why are they so central in terms of collecting the data that's here? So what if you're required, and all these broader aspects are because you need to kind of have a very diverse sampling of the information in order to get a wide capture of the information at this local level to actually make a sizable response in terms of climate, in terms of mitigation for what's there. And I have 42 seconds left. So here's the recommendations. We want to try looking at a center. In the center, you essentially have a place where all these stakeholders can kind of play a role. You can actually, from the center, look at these community outreach and education programs. Data collection and model validation come through as well. We can look at different innovative proposals that actually move the needle on mathematical modeling and social behavior. And then we're looking at addressing bias, right? So how is actually bias in underserved communities in terms of models themselves, try to remove some of that implicit bias that tends to appear. And I have 8 seconds and that's it. Thanks.